Welcome back to the Mindful Hunter podcast. I'm your host as always, Jay Nichol. And today we're going to do a Q&A episode. So I threw up a little prompt on Instagram a couple days ago and got some questions that we're going to dive into. The other thing that I want to note is that I also threw up a post on mindful reviews. And the way Q&As are going to work moving forward is that we're going to prioritize the questions from mindful reviews. There's not a ton of them in there because I'm in there kind of 24/7 chatting with all those people. I think most times when they have questions for me, I'm pretty easy to get answers from, but we did get 7 or 8. And so we'll give priority to those. So I suppose that's another potential benefit of being on mindful reviews is that if you do, definitely want your question to get answered on the podcast, the mindful reviews questions will always get answered first. Now, on that note, I thought maybe an interesting little update I could do maybe like once a month or just when I do these Q&A episodes. And this actually was a suggestion from my buddy Ben, who's a member over at Mindful Reviews, just to give you a little insight into how the community works. So there's a few different rooms you can belong to, let me back up. It's basically a platform where you can create different spaces or channels. And these spaces or channels can have different formats. They can be a chat room. They can be more of a forum-like space. You can create events. There's 3 or 4 different types. Now, we used to keep all of our gear discussions in one chat room just called Gear Chat. And there was tons of really good conversations going on there, and it was really insightful, and everybody was chiming in. But the common frustration from people was, there was no way to thread conversations. So as soon as you started talking about more than one thing at a time, the conversation got jumbled really quickly. And number 2, there was no way to archive conversations or make it searchable. So somebody would ask a question, a new member, it was something we'd all talked about a month ago, and you'd try to refer to them to the conversation, but you're basically just scrolling through this, gigantic chat stream. And so recently what I did is I created a new space within the platform dedicated solely to what the space is called is gear decision feedback. So when you're thinking about buying a new piece of gear or just any gear decision, like I'm going to switch to something, I'm going to buy something, I'm going to maybe sell one thing so that I can get onto another platform, or you're looking at the pros and cons of 2 particular pieces of gear. What you do is it is like a forum, but it's a little more multi-featured than that. It's a little more robust. You basically make a post, detail what it is you're curious about, and then add any pictures or additional information like what you currently own or what you've owned in the past and how that's affecting your decision. Basically, give us as much context as possible. And then that opens up a threaded chat underneath where people can not only post comments, but then those comments can be posted back to. You can post pictures in the comments, you can post videos in the comments, you can post links, and it's worked extremely well. And not only that, it's archivable and searchable. So I'm just going to run through the type of things that we've talked about in the last few days. And I want to give my buddy Choice a bit of a nod of appreciation because he kind of helped me discover this by accident. This first post here called Looking for a New Bow. Choice put that up in a different part of the platform in a way that I had never anticipated that part of the platform being used for this type of question. And at first I was going to take it down and say, hey, can you just ask that in Gear Chat? Because this space isn't really meant for that. And then all of a sudden, before I could get to it, he was getting all this great feedback below. And I thought to myself, holy shit, I think he's kind of solved our problem because this is the way we want to be addressing these types of conversations moving forward. So Choice said, I'm looking for a new bow. And then he basically makes this big post, talks about his age, kind of bows he's owned in the past, where he lives, type of pro shops he has access to. And then there's a bunch of comments all down below. Now, I'm not going to get into them, but they're really insightful, like what bows people have tried this year and they've really liked, which ones they haven't, good and bad experiences they've had with pro shops, a bunch of other, it's really fulsome and helpful. So There's one great thing that somebody's brought up. Another one was upgrading my rain gear. Now, Chris brought this up and talks about the rain gear he's owned in the past and the type of stores he has access to, what he likes and doesn't like about mountaineering brands versus hunting brands. And then, a ton of comments on this one, all specific advice. Now, somebody might say, what is different about this than a forum? I mean, at its heart, there is nothing different about this than a forum. I would argue, though, the paywall keeps the trolls out and it keeps the engagement high. Like, I don't know if you made a post on a regular forum upgrading my rain gear that you would get this amount of specific feedback tailored to your needs. And so I think that's a major benefit. And also how robust it is, like the ability to add pictures to the comments and all that kind of stuff and keep it threaded. Like, it has a much more real-time chat feel to it than a forum does. Also, now we're at 148 members today, which is fantastic. And I think that's great. I think we're growing at a phenomenal pace, but it's still a very small community. So when you ask questions, you get personalized responses. And then Lucas put up hiking boots, run and gun, narrow heel, wide 4-foot. And then he goes on to, again, explain the types of boots he's owned in the past, which ones he's liked, which ones he hasn't, the kind of flex rating that he's looking for going forward, and then kind of some of the challenges in his area of getting access to boots. And then boom, just a bunch of people jump in, what they like, what they don't like, some recommendations. It's been very beneficial. This was the community that I was hoping for. Like-minded individuals helping each other out. Gear is expensive. And I don't want people to think that I'm saying that your hunting success depends on your gear. I'm not. And I don't think the only thing we should be concerning ourselves is with our gear. It's not. However, you do need gear. Whether you buy budget gear or premium gear, you're going to need boots. You're going to need a pack. You're going to need a tent. And if this platform can help you make better buying decisions and save some money in the long run, then and skip that process of buying 2 or 3 of the wrong thing before you find the right thing, then it will pay for itself 10 times over, at a lifetime membership of $250. I guarantee people are going to save $250 on gear in the first year alone, just from the feedback that they're getting from people. I'm even learning stuff on the regular. So I think what I'll do is, in the future, I will, before the podcast, I will dip into that forum, the Gear Decision feedback space, and I will do a little summary of what people have asked and what the feedback has been. And I'll try and share that with you guys so that everybody can kind of benefit from it, because there's a lot of people that have really great gear insights on the forum. Okay, so let's dive into the first question. Hang on, where are we at? Okay, what are my fall 2023 hunt plans? So one note I want to make about hunt plans is I think I'm gonna always share my hunt plans, because I do the gear dumps pre and post, and I think it's normally I do films, but I have noticed that as the podcast and the YouTube channel gets a little bit bigger and more newer hunters are watching, I get a lot more like, where are you going questions. And I just want to share a little piece of etiquette for people who are newer to hunting. It's kind of like asking, what color panties is your wife wearing? You're probably curious, but it doesn't mean you should ask. So it's one of those things that's kind of rude to ask. So don't send me a DM and say, hey, what unit were you in? Or whatever, because sometimes I've been pretty liberal with that information. I want to help people figure out where they're going. But I've realized there's fallout from that. There's other people who have worked really hard to find spots, and I could be inadvertently blowing up somebody else's spot, and I don't want to do that. I also have several hunts coming up where I'm taking a partner with me, and that partner may have had some influence on where we're going, and it would kind of like be me giving out his spot if I told you where we were going. So I will still talk about my hunts. I will share tons of information about my hunts. I'm still going to film lots of my hunts. So if you're that guy who hops on Google Earth and you're trying to line up, skylines and lakes and all that kind of stuff, I mean, you can still continue to do that, and you'll probably be able to find out, roughly where I went, because I don't really, especially on the super remote backcountry stuff, I don't make a point of trying to hide where I am. But I'm not going to get into the specifics about where I'm going. I'm not even going to talk about regions and stuff. I'll just talk about the hunts. So all of that being said, maybe get out for a day or two after turkey. I'm kind of throwing this out to the podcast. I've never hunted turkey personally. I'd love to get out for a day or two. Being in prep for the bodybuilding show, I'm certainly not leaving town for any super long trips, but if anybody, wants to hang out for a day or two and go chase some turkeys and you got some good spots, I'd love the opportunity to kind of come tag along and learn how to hunt some turkeys. But if that doesn't pan out, it's probably not something, this is not the year that I'm going to be able to spend a lot of time doing that. That's another main reason why this is my last year doing a bodybuilding show. I love the discipline. I love the simplicity and the purity of it. But if I'm really honest with myself, and there's a good question about this coming up later on that I kind of pre-scanned, the priority for me is hunting. I'm going to make another kind of mini announcement here. Maybe I'll do it after this question, but my priority is hunting. So I need to do everything in my life that's not my family needs to somehow come back to hunting. And bodybuilding is just not compatible. It's not complementary. So maybe get out for a day or two after turkey, maybe get out for a couple days after spring bear, and those will all just be like day hunts. There's a guy I just met, and him and his son are trying to get into hunting, and they've never been out before. And I think one of the areas where I've lacked is mentoring new people. So I think trying to get that guy out for a day or two after some bears might be cool, just to get, he's got a young kid, and I think they'd have a blast just driving around in the truck looking for bears for the day, seeing what we can turn up. So, but all that aside, between now and June, primary focus is bodybuilding show. And then in July, I'm headed to Europe for 2 weeks for a wedding and a vacation with my family. And then season kicks off hard August. So 2-week sheep hunt in August, more to be discussed on that. It will be backcountry. That's all I'm going to say on that. And then next hunt after that is archery, caribou, and goat with Kevin from the Focus Hunting podcast. So expect some kind of collab material from us in the somewhat near future on that one. We'll probably do a gear podcast on one of our shows or something like that here in the next little while. I'm really excited to go on a hunt with Kevin. Dude is an absolute killer. So I'm looking forward to learning what I can from him. I should also say I will have a partner for my sheep hunt as well. Another guy who's definitely more experienced than I am, has definitely killed more shit than I have, and really looking forward to spending some time with him as well and learning whatever I can. So that's going to be in September. And then it looks like in October, I may be heading to Alberta for mule deer, although not for myself, probably in a guiding capacity. There's still some details to be worked out on that front, and maybe some kind of announcement to come at a later date, but something along those lines. And if that falls through, probably chasing mule deer here in BC. November, I am going to Saskatchewan on a guided whitetail hunt. So already got that one booked, already know where I'm going. Super excited. It's going to be cold as shit, but I'm going to take another kick at the can and at sitting in stands all day and seeing if I can arrow, a big giant whitetail. December will be off. And then there's a couple things going on in January and February. I just applied for Audad and deer in New Mexico in January. So if I draw either one of those, and even if I don't, I might do over-the-counter aoudad in either January or March. And then February, I will be doing my typical winter goat hunt again. So there's that. And that is kind of like my hunt year, like August through to, let's call it February or March. So we got sheep, caribou, goat, mule deer in Alberta, whitetail in Saskatchewan, mule deer or aoudad in New Mexico, and then back for goat in British Columbia. And obviously, if I take a goat in September, I won't be eligible to kill a goat in February, but I've already been talking with a buddy, and we're going to go together this year goat hunting. He's got way more ski touring experience than I do and way more climbing experience. And I feel like I've learned a couple areas good enough where there's goats that I would have been able to kill if I could have been more aggressive with the climbing. And so we kind of started text messaging after my last goat hunt. And I was like, let's just do this thing together, man. So even if I don't have a tag, I'll still do that hunt because he'll have a tag. And maybe I'll focus more on the filming. I just want to participate in getting a goat out of one of those areas that I've been going back to now a few times. So there's the plans for 2023. Up next, thoughts on the positive and negatives with the explosion of the YouTube hunter influencer kind of personality. And then Ben said, maybe you could expand on this and how Mindful Reviews is impacting or fitting into the hunt community. This is a super complicated topic. And I think there's a lot of ways to look at it and there's a lot of nuance. I don't think you can say it is wholly negative or positive. Here's what I would say. If you put a gun to my head and said, or let's get another way. You give me a magic wand and I can wave it and I can either completely obliterate social media and YouTube from hunting, or I can leave it intact. I'm going to leave it intact. I think on the whole, it brings more positive than it brings negative. And I say that from a very personal space. I came into this, I guess, 8 years ago now, other than hunting from with my old man for moose a couple years when I was a kid, which I didn't really actually learn much about hunting itself. I was like 12 and 13 years old. I didn't know anything about hunting, and I certainly didn't know anything about backcountry hunting. And I have learned 99% of what I know from YouTube. I'm going to say this with a caveat, from YouTube and the social media. What I will say, I learned what I needed to know to get out there from YouTube and social media. The rest of what I've learned through experience. And that's possibly, like, if I'm going to start outlining areas of concern for me, that would be one of them, is that people think they can just watch and watch and watch and watch, and that translates to knowledge, and it doesn't. You need to implement the information that you have absorbed in order to create a skill, right? So I think people get too hung up on just wanting to absorb the knowledge and not actually getting out there, and pounding the hills and creating those opportunities for experience, because that's where the real gems come from. But without social media and YouTube, I never would have had the opportunities that I've had. So that's one positive. I'm also pretty libertarian. Like, what social media and YouTube has done for us is it's empowered us to kind of create our own future, or write our own ticket in regards to like what you want to do for a living, or how you want to, make your mark in the world. Like, I have spent I got to go back and see when my first YouTube video was posted. It might be 5 years ago now or a little bit longer. And I think YouTube might have been before Instagram. I got to do the math. But I've been building my YouTube and Instagram for, let's just say, 5 years. And I never quite knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want sponsorship from a major brand. I knew I didn't want to churn out, just the same old product placement horse shit that everybody else was. But if you look at what I've been able to create through content creation, like the fact that Mindful Reviews now exists, the podcast exists, my YouTube channel exists, and that whole ecosystem is able to create revenue and start to take a meaningful part in my life. My ultimate goal is that, fairly soon here, hopefully by the end of the calendar year, I am 100% focused on Mindful Hunter and Mindful Reviews from a career perspective. And it's what I do for a day job. And as long as I keep my nose to the grindstone and keep churning out content and building the audience and building subscribers for Mindful Reviews, I think that's a realistic goal. And the more I can give back to that community, the greater the value for those people who have shown support and joined up. So I could go on and on and on about the negative things, but I also think if you put blinders on, there isn't really that many negative things that have been done to the hunting industry from YouTube and social media. Like, people would say more pressure. I think there's an argument for that, but I personally have never had a hunt ruined by pressure. I tend to hunt in areas where there's not a lot of people, so that's part of it. But I also think if you're willing to just get after it and ignore what everybody else is doing and just put some miles between you and a road, I still think there's lots of great places to hunt where not many people go. I run into the odd guy every now and then, but that doesn't ruin hunts. It's just like, okay, you stay over there. A really prime, I can think of a couple really prime examples where I ran into somebody and it was like, oh, I'll stay on this side, you stay on that side, and we'll have at her. And there's so much country, you don't really need to worry about it. I think when I focus on it, there are some negatives that impact me psychologically. Like when I see like idiots on Instagram or all this product stuff and these like fake reviews on YouTube, like it starts to piss me off. And there's a magic button on Instagram and the same thing on YouTube. They show up differently, but like on Instagram, I can block people. The moment somebody starts posting content that like fundamentally, doesn't align with my values, I just block them. I'll unfollow and block, or I might mute. Because I used to think that it was an opportunity to exercise, tolerance and growth and will to like read this stuff that's like, just garbage and try not to lose my temper. And then I realized this is a waste of my energy. Here's a prime example. I've wondered if I should talk about this. Most people won't there is an anonymous meme guy in BC, and I'm not even going to say his name because I don't want to drive any traffic to his site. And it's like, the guy is clearly a pussy because he's anonymous. If you want to make derogatory remarks about people and not identify yourself, you're flat out a pussy. You're hiding behind some anonymous account. If you look at the bigger meme accounts in the States, you know who all those guys are. They go on podcasts, their first names. And when they make fun of the big influencers, they're doing it clearly and credibly. You know what I mean? This guy won't post his name. Nobody knows who he is. Has like double-digit followers. Nobody gives a shit. But for some reason, he has a stick in his ass about me. And there's like just an unbelievable amount of memes on his page about me. Now, here's the hilarious part. These things are so insanely detailed. The only way you know that much about me is if you have literally ingested almost every piece of content I've ever made. So the thing that I find somewhat ironic is that while this guy is like my biggest hater on social media, I think in reality, he's my biggest fan. I don't know if there's anybody else that watches as much of my stuff as this guy does. But anyways, I used to feel like I needed to make a space for that because I needed to have thick skin and I needed to be able to look at something that was insulting to me and not instantly lose my temper, because that was a mark of like an emotionally and a spiritually evolved man. And so, yeah, I would look at him from time to time and I would check in on the account. I'd be like, okay, that's what he's posting about this week. No big deal. And then I realized one day, by even engaging with this content in any way, shape, or form, I'm voluntarily, giving this pussy my energy, right? That I can use for other stuff. I can use it to create this podcast. I can use it to do research for a review. I can use it to answer someone's DM about what boots to purchase. I can use it to go play with my kid in the park. And so I get to choose where I apply my time and my energy, not the idiots on Instagram and YouTube. And so I blocked them. And from time to time, people still send me, they're like, hey man, you see what this idiot posted? I will immediately delete it from the chat and I will send that person an email. And I will politely say, don't send that garbage to my account. Because what you are doing is now you've also voluntarily given that garbage your energy, and now you're giving it my energy as well. So I think the lesson to be learned from this is that you are not a victim of social media. Social media is not something that happens to you. You are not this innocent bystander that Instagram just washes over and you're just left with whatever it chooses to leave behind. Your feed is called that for a reason. You curate your feed by choosing who you follow and who you support. So if it's messing with your headspace, block them. There's a thing on your subscriptions page, like, that homepage on YouTube. I used to see there's a couple like bodybuilder influencers that are just like garbage human beings. They, promote really garbage products and they talk about super high cycles and they're just like shitty people. But because I watch a lot of bodybuilding stuff, they would just pop up in my feed. And then I realized you can just click that little 3 dots and you can say, do not show me this content or content like this anymore. And you click that and it just nukes it from your feed. So now every time something that comes into my feed that doesn't align with my values, I'm like, don't show me content like this anymore. Boom. And it's gone. So now when I open my YouTube, it's all positive shit. When I open my Instagram, it's all positive shit. Like, it's stuff that I find inspiring. Like, it's people doing shit better than I am. It's like really interesting and engaging content. So this is why I feel very strongly that overall it's a positive thing. But I recognize that not everyone, I have a young daughter. Do I want my daughter spending a bunch of time on Instagram? No, I don't. She hasn't had the opportunity to kind of develop the psychology and the emotional stability that I have to make these decisions and to feel okay about herself, even when she sees things that don't align with her own personal self-perception. Anyways, as usual, I feel like that was an incredibly long, drawn-out answer to a question. But what I will say, I love the fact that social media has given us the ability to focus in on whatever our passion is and then generate an ability to share content with people about that. Like, I did Mindful Hunter for years without ever thinking about generating revenue because I found it emotionally satisfying to be able to create content and share it with people. If they liked it, I liked it. It was a mutually beneficial relationship. Now, if you also want to add some type of revenue generation into that, I think that's great too, but I don't think that's a necessity. I think just making cool shit and sharing it with the world makes the world a better place, and those platforms have given us the ability to do that. So I'm going to say overall, I think it's positive. Now, to address Ben's second question, how do I believe Mindful Reviews has impacted this? I will say this. I am currently not happy with the state of, the influencer perception when it comes to gear reviews, which you all know. We have sponsored people promoting products and telling you they're doing reviews when they're really doing commercials. And that pisses me off. That's why I started Mindful Reviews. I think given how strong the response has been to Mindful Reviews, that I'm having an impact on that. And I think if other people want to do it, I think that's great. I didn't start Mindful Reviews to be the only guy who was being honest about gear reviews. I think if you look at Mark and Steve, and especially, anything they do on the Hunt Backcountry podcast, that's another great example. Those guys don't have to do that stuff. They talk about all kinds of brands that they have nothing to do with. Now, I'm sure there's some ancillary spillover in sales, because when people listen to that and they trust Mark and Steve and then they want a backpack, they feel this reciprocal desire to, buy a pack from EXO. I think that's great. I have no problems with that. But what I hope is, not only do I hope people join Mindful Reviews, but I hope it shifts the sentiment of the industry so that other people are like, oh, there's another way to do this. I don't have to just get a sponsorship and be a shill. I can carve my own path through this. And I'll tell you something else, how I know it's making a difference. Big brands would not give me the time of day a year or two ago. Trying to borrow product was like trying to pull teeth. Now, part of this is the expansion of the community itself, but part of it is the quality and the level of depth I go into in the reviews. And I think brands are here's what I want brands to feel like. Jay's going to look at our shit one way or another, and he's going to be incredibly honest about it one way or another. We might as well get out in front of it and lend him our shit early on in the process. If you're a brand and you feel like you have built something decent and you have confidence in it, you should have no concern about sending it to me. I try not to throw anybody under the bus. I think I used to be more aggressive in my reviews, and I would say really outlandish things to try and get, build some excitement. And I've realized that that's not really appropriate. And I try and be very measured in the way I give reviews, because at the end of the day, someone has designed and built these products and they're trying to create something positive. At least that's what I like to think. But the amount of large brands that will now take my calls and that will now engage in conversations and be like, yeah, man, what do you need? We'll send it to you. I still don't ask for free stuff. I still don't ask for sponsorships. I'm not looking for that type of relationship. I'm looking to be able to call people and say, hey, I'm doing a review on X. Everybody in the community is really curious about your product. Can I borrow it for a couple months? I'll ship it back to you when I'm done. And the amount of yeses I get now compared to a year or two ago is night and day. And I think that is a testament to the impact that Mindful Reviews and the entire kind of disruptive approach that Mindful Reviews was supposed to have. It's proof that it is having that impact. So that's where I think, Mindful Reviews plays a role. And that's where I think it continued to play a role moving forward. All right, Lance says, biggest surprise so far while reviewing gear. Something that you had low expectations and were pleasantly surprised at its performance, and conversely, something you thought would come out on top, but in reality was a disappointment. I'm going to say those ultralight tripods. I'm going to be honest with you. I looked at that Wiser tripod like a year ago. And because I was on the Outdoorsman's platform, it's a tri-pan head I still love. And I don't know why, but in my head, the idea of turning a handle for the tilt functionality just seemed janky as hell to me. And when I was looking at the size of this thing and how much it weighed, I'm like, there's no way that thing can be solid. It's just impossible that a 6-ounce piece of gear with some crappy twisting carbon fiber handle is going to replace my Outdoorsman's pan head. And then not only did that blow me away, but then when I got that tracer at 4.5 ounces, like I was like, these are phenomenal products. These are phenomenal products. Now, you want to know what's interesting about both those products? Individual owner operator boutique shops. Like, I think that's another note to take away from this. Like, that's the type of gear that is really impressing me these days. Like, somebody has a vision. So as a bit of a sneak peek, we're having the founder of Peaks Equipment on next week, Bryce Bishop. I'll throw up a Q&A probably later this week to get your guys' insights on what you'd like me to ask him. But there's another great company. I just recently tested his headlamp. Review will be out soon. I think it's great. He's got another couple really great products. I think Argali is another example. These smaller companies that have only put out, 1 to 4 or 5 products, and they stay hyper focused, get me really excited. And so I think that would be one of my biggest surprises in a positive way, was how good a panhead could be and at how light. Like, that's just insanely impressive what Weiser and Tracer have been able to do. Another sneak peek I will give, because I got slammed with requests for the Outdoorsman's micro panhead to be reviewed in relation to the Tracer and the Weiser. Outdoorsman's was already sending me their carbon fiber tripod, and it hadn't left Outdoorsman's yet. So I sent them a quick email and was like, hey, would you mind throwing in a micro panhead? And they didn't bat an eye. And it was funny. They were like, actually, we just saw the video with the Weiser and the Tracer. And we were asking ourselves, I wonder why the micro didn't make the cut. And to be honest with you, it's because I still buy a lot of my own stuff. And I just didn't have it on hand. I bought the Weiser, I bought the Tracer, I paid cash for each. And I just didn't have the micro panhead. So they were a positive surprise. Now, what was a negative surprise? When the Sea to Summit tent leaked on me, and I thought the tent was a piece of garbage, that would have been what I thought was a negative, right? But then it turned on me, and I'm pretty certain now I just left that top zipper open like a 1/2 inch, or that's how it came. And I just never actually checked to see if it was closed, which is not on, Sea to Summit. They'd have no ability to know that all zippers are closed when they ship it. And that's clearly on me that I should have checked it first. But I mean, that was pretty disappointing. I'm trying to think of what else was really disappointing. There was, the Vortex glass, that wasn't surprising, but like, just that company's inability to be honest with their marketing material is just really disheartening. Like, they are not an optics company. They were a marketing company that happens to sell optics. And that is just, I got nothing to say about that. That disappoints me. Yeah, that's about all I can think of. I'll have a think on it. If anything else comes to me, I'll talk about it on a future show. Okay, let's get to the rest of these questions. As always, this has taken way longer than I imagined. Dylan Clark says, if Vortex is what you can afford, is it worth it, or do you continue to save for other glass? I think everybody needs a pair of 10 power binoculars when you start out. And if you've only got $500, please save more than $200-300. But if you've only got enough money for, let's just say, a budget pair of binoculars, there are better binoculars out there than Vortex. Here's the deal. The differences are going to be pretty microscopic if you're paying less than $500 for a pair of binos, but I do think it matters. I would like to do that review to tell you, if you've only got this much, this is the brand. But you have other kind of budget brands. You have Tract, you have Maven. Nikon has some very interesting products. Bushnell has some very interesting products. There are, there's some European stuff like the Miopta, and Cow is not exactly budget, but there are better budget-friendly options than Vortex. no matter what you're getting from Vortex, you're overpaying for it because they've beefed up an insane warranty that is going to require some amount of payment, overpricing to take care of. And just the shocking difference between the quality of their glass compared to all those other brands. Just buy something else. I just really don't, if I could accomplish anything, it would be people not supporting that company because I really don't believe that they, are genuinely concerned with like making good products for good people. I think that's all I'm going to say about that. So buy something else. If you've got them, it's not the end of the world. Like, listen, all I bought was Vortex at the beginning. This is why it's so important to be honest. You know why all I bought was Vortex at the beginning? Because of fucking Meat Eater. Okay. Because when I started hunting, I didn't hang out with hunters. All I had was like podcasts and Meat Eater and all the rest. And I watched this guy, Steve Ranella, who on Vortex's payroll and full of shit tells you that these Vortex Razor binoculars are the best binoculars money can buy. And that if you really are committed to hunting, these are the binoculars you're going to go and buy. So I went and took my money and I went and bought the garbage product that shill told me to buy. And then I found out he's full of shit, that he lies, that he gets paid by a company and he trades his integrity for a paycheck. That's what people like Steve Ranella who work for Vortex do. You trade integrity for money. Now, he does a lot of really great stuff. I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you said, do you have Steve Ranella in our community or not? I want him in. I think he knocks it out of the park in a whole bunch of areas. But why he feels the need to shill crap product from a shit company, I don't understand. And that's why Mindful Reviews is so important to me, because I don't want people who are coming up in this industry to like fall victim to the same marketing garbage that I fell victim to. I know it works because it worked on me. And it took me years of like buying it and trying it and buying it and trying it. And then finally buying the more expensive stuff and being like, hey, wait a minute. This is not the best stuff. And even for this price, there's significantly better stuff that I could be spending my money on. And this guy who I trusted, and I don't know why I did, he's just a TV personality, but but he seemed pretty genuine. So anyways, I don't want to get off topic, but in response to the question, I do believe that there are better places to spend your money than Vortex. But I think the real question you're asking is, if all you can afford is a budget optic, should you do that or wait for later? I would say everybody needs a pair of 10s. So if all you're going to do is spend $500 on a pair of 10s, fine, do that. Then save up for your nice glass. If it's going to take you 2 or 3 years to save up for like one of the second tier options from one of the alpha companies, like a Trinovid or something like that, or a Zeiss Conquest type of thing, that's okay. Save your money. Wait. When it comes to spotters, until you have a pair of alpha 10s, don't spend any of your money on a spotting scope, and wait until you can afford a really good spotting scope, because a shit spotting scope is really not much better than a pair of 12s. Next question. What are you looking for when scouting research potential hunting areas? That's an entire podcast, man. I mean, what animal, what time of year, what transportation, what access? I mean, I'm looking at all of that. So I don't know. I can't really do that question justice in a Q&A episode, but I do think that deserves further investigation. At the end of the day, you are looking for habitat that is going to be conducive to that animal, whatever that may be. And you're going to need to do research to find out what that is. And then you're looking for terrain that is going to be conducive to your success. And that normally means finding something hard enough to get to that most people won't go there, but easy enough to get there that you can actually do it. And so 9 times out of 10, those are the two things I'm trying to put together. How can I get away from people? Where can I, what spot can I find on this map that I don't think many other people will go to? And then is that spot likely to hold animals? And to be honest, I think historically I've placed too much priority on the former and not enough priority on the latter. And I'm going to change that moving forward. Also, historically, what I've done is picked areas that are too large. Like I want to move in glass every single day. And if the most recent goat hunt taught me anything, I need to look for much smaller areas that are much better quality and just sit there for multiple days. Yeah. Up next, how do you balance hunting, career, and a family? Something has to give or take. Yeah, man, 100%. I'm pretty obsessed to the point of like negative consequences in my life. Between everything that I spend my time on, there's days when I'm short-tempered with my wife. There's days when I yell at my kid. There's days I don't get enough sleep. There's days when I prioritize my own achievements over what my family needs from me. That's not every day, but like that happens for sure. And sometimes I worry about that, and sometimes it gets out of control and I need to kind of rein things in a little bit and focus a little more on what I need to at home. I think it's a question everyone has to ask for themselves. Here's what I will say. And I'm not fucking Jocko, wake up at 4 a.m. You can if you want, but I will say this. For most people, there is more productivity in your day than you think. And if you are hypercritical and hyper-focused about what's really important, then you will find a way to get most of it done. I think, if people looked at what I'm able to do during every given week between the gym, between Mindful Hunter, between Mindful Reviews, between my consulting company, my family, it seems like a shitload of stuff, but it's not really. You know what I mean? Like, I still watch Netflix for an hour every night. I'm watching, Drive to Survive, the F1 show right now. Now, usually I fall asleep in the first 20 minutes. I make a protein shake, I drink it while I'm watching, and then I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning on the couch. That's what happens 99% of the time because I'm nuked by the time I get down there. But I always have time with my kid every night. So it's not like I'm I don't want to put up this facade that I'm grinding 24/7 because I'm not. I work hard and I stay focused. I think my particular skills that come in handy is that I find very quickly those things that benefit my goals and those things that don't. I think if anything, what most people tend to do is spend too much time on the shit that doesn't matter and not enough time on the shit that does matter. And being really ruthless with yourself about that. Like, if this activity is not bringing value into my life or moving me closer to accomplishing one of my goals, then stop doing it. The gym is like that for me right now. Other than the bodybuilding show, it doesn't actually get me any closer to any of my big macro goals. And that's why this has got to be the last year. And that's because I'm ruthless with myself. I'm wasting my time. I'm 44 years old. I'm never going to be a competitive bodybuilder. It's largely this ego-fueled drive of mine because I have this vision of this thing I want to achieve. But when I ask myself, what do I get when I achieve it? The answer is nothing. When I look at my hunting goals and my goals related to Mindful Hunter and Mindful Review, when I ask myself, what do I get when I achieve these goals? There's real legitimate answers. Do you know what I mean? That move me further up the ladder in life towards where I'm trying to get. Bodybuilding doesn't do that for me. I love it. And I think it's fine to do things that you love just because you love them, but you need to be honest with yourself. Is it impacting your ability to do the other things that not only do you love, but positively contribute to your life and your family and your goals and all that other stuff? Business, videos, podcasts, reviews, they do that. And bodybuilding doesn't. And I wasn't ready to give up this year because last year was okay, but it's not what I was capable of. I know I can do better. This is my last kick at the can. And I think that's okay too. Recognizing it and then it's setting out some type of timetable to get you to where you move on for something. That's okay too. You don't have to quit everything tomorrow. But I think being more critical about what matters and what doesn't, I think most people say I don't have enough time. What they're really saying is I spend too much time doing shit that doesn't matter, and I don't have enough time left in the day to do the shit that does matter. So one of my little hacks is at the beginning of each week, I say to myself, what are the top 3 things that if I accomplish this week will bring the most value into my life? And right now I've made a commitment that for 2 months, I'm going to do a review per week. Now, luckily, I have a shitload of field time behind me, so I have all these notes to draw from. So it takes me about a day and a half to do a review. I can compile all my notes, structure the video, and do all that stuff in one day, and then I can film and edit it in another half a day. Now, sometimes that day and a half actually takes 4 days because I'm doing shit 2 and 3 hours at a time. But doing a review is on the list of 3 things. Doing the podcast is also on the list of 3 things because I know for a fact, based on quantifiable data, that if I put out a review every week and I put out a podcast every week, my channel grows at a certain rate. And as the channel grows, the subscriber base for Mindful Reviews grow and the whole ecosystem comes up. But the first thing that needs to happen in that whole chain is a review and a podcast. Then that opens up the door to all kinds of other work that I can do further down the chain. And that leaves one more thing that I can do. Normally, it's always work related. So I pick one major work task, and those 3 things are non-negotiable. So even if it means like I got to cancel some appointments or something else ends up being late or I end up missing something or I train 5 days a week, if it means I have to train 4 days a week, it does not matter. At the beginning of the week, when I set aside those 3 activities, they will be accomplished by the end of the week. No ifs, ands, or buts. And that makes it very clear to me throughout the week what's really important and what isn't, because I have this yardstick of these 3 activities that I can look back to, like when I'm contemplating, should I do X or should I do Y? And it's like, well, does X contribute to the priorities? Yes or no. Does Y contribute to the priorities? Yes or no? And depending on what those answers are, then I can strategically decide whether or not I want to do that activity. So that's how I handle balance. Early season hiking boots with a solid stiff sole and light. I'm going to go with the Schnee's Beartooths. They are my favorite all around boot. I think they have a flex rating of 2. There is, you want a solid stiff sole. I don't really think you want anything stiffer than a 2 out of 4 on an early season boot. And especially when you say light, if you start getting into 3s and 4s, you're going to be, the boot has to get heavier to accommodate that stiff of a sole. So yeah, man, Schnee's Beartooths. I can't recommend the Timberlines. The Timberlines are less stiff, which you're not looking for, so you wouldn't care about them. But I found in a pair I tested where the instep creased, it cut into my foot so bad that I felt like I had a broken foot after a week of hunting. It was brutal. Did your La Sportiva boots break in much with use, or do they stay stiff as a board? The bottoms stay stiff as a board. It's like walking on a concrete brick, but that's the point of that style of mountaineering boot, because once you get into things like they're a winter mountaineering boot, so they've got a heel welt and a toe welt, so you can put full-blown crampons on them. They fit in my snowshoes great. And when you start doing things like crampons and other things, you have to have that like insanely stiff. And even for walking up in sheep hunting, like you want it that stiff. So I have worn my La Sportivas more than any other boot I own for years now. And the sole is as stiff as it ever was. There's zero give in that sole. The rest of the boot is very worn in to the point where I might consider replacing them sometime soon. I'm going to be doing a longitudinal review of those boots because one of the requests I got recently was review some stuff that I've used for years where I know it like inside and out and I've seen how it broke down over time. And I think that's a really cool thing to look at. So I'm going to look at those La Sportiva boots and give my full thoughts. Things you've learned about gear in general since putting out all of your review content. Well, one of the things I've learned is don't come to conclusions too quickly. When a piece of gear doesn't do what you want it to do, or it has a feature that you don't like, it could just be that you're ignorant of how to use it. Like the amount of times I've put up a review, like when I did the Marsupial review and I didn't mention the magnetic clasps on the front of the two pouches, you have no idea how many people hammered me with that. Marsupial themselves got in touch and they were like, we appreciated the review, but did you not know that blah, blah, blah? I've owned that shit for a year. Literally used it on like 5 hunts. I had no idea that you could fold that all the way front. Now, how would I know? I mean, I wasn't included. There was no instructions. Like if you don't fold, like, was I supposed to guess that it was there? That's the part that frustrated me. Like, how do you expect your customers to know this shit unless you tell them or they accidentally find out? And with magnets, I think it's also important that you should definitely advertise that because they have an adverse effect on compasses. But anyways, jumping to conclusions too quickly. And back to like the tripod panhead thing, assuming I knew what a piece of gear was going to behave like is something that I try not to do anymore. I try and just look at them all unbiased with fresh eyes. And it's like, okay, well, I'll see how it works when I get it, you know? What bow releases do you use and why? I use a hinge release. I use a Fulcrum Flex from Trueball XL, and I love it. I'm a huge proponent of a hinge release. I shoot target with it. I hunt with it. It's the only release I've used for over 3 years now. And I think there's other really nice hinge reviews out there. I don't think you necessarily have to use that one. I like a heavier, solid, at least 3-finger hinge release. I don't like 2-finger, but you can go all the way up to 4 for sure, like a 3 or 4-finger. And I like it for the psychological surprise release. I think I had a really hard time getting a surprise release with an index trigger release. And I think any trigger release is going to really have the same flaws. I think you could practice with another kind, but even if you're going to have a trigger, at least a thumb button allows you to roll the release into your thumb. Whereas all the other trigger releases are pretty hard to like work your shot sequence and still get a surprise release. So whether it's a tension release or a hinge release, I think shooting with some type of release that's going to allow you to get a surprise is the key. Somebody says, can you get Pop Winkle on to talk rifles and cartridges? He is booked. He will be on for the week of April the 3rd at some point, and I'll throw up a Q&A before he comes on, and we're just going to talk everything rifles. My opinion on suppressors for hunting. I don't have any personal opinion on suppressors because I've never used them and I've never done any research. But just going off of what I've heard, which is mostly from Mark at XO, I don't see why they would be a bad thing. They add a little bit of weight to your rifle, but if we're talking about like noise damage and like alerting animals and a bunch of other stuff, like I find it very hard to come up with a case against suppressors for hunting. But again, not my area of specialty, so I'm not going to make a hard statement one way or the other. Kevin asks, the XLR 4.0 or MDT HNT 26, So basically a chassis versus a premium carbon rifle stock. Pros and cons of stocks versus chassis. Again, out of my pay grade, something I will dig into on the rifle episode. Right now, I can say the main difference for me is that a folding chassis allows me to have a shorter silhouette on the back of my backpack so it doesn't get caught in brush as much. That is literally the only reason I'm switching. And I'm sure there's gun nerds who are going to tell me there's way more than that. And I'm, grateful to listen and will happily share that information. But I don't personally know it as of yet. Somebody else asked for chassis research. We'll get to it, man. I promise. Somebody asked for self-help and entrepreneurial book recommendations. To be honest, I don't really go in for that shit anymore. I went through a phase where I read a lot of that kind of stuff. And yeah, here's what I will say. Read anything by Jim Collins. He wrote From Good to Great. And he is a genius when it comes to like the structure of building businesses and managing people and managing time. And he has this brilliant thing called the flywheel concept. He has another concept called the hedgehog concept. Those two concepts alone changed my life and changed the way I do business. I went back to school and I did a postgraduate degree in business. I have an MBA, and I find a lot of like the entrepreneurial books a little, just a little weak, to be brutally honest about it. I was trying to think of another book that I was going to recommend. If it comes back to me later in the podcast, I will do it. The other thing I will recommend is reading or watching biographies of people who inspire you, because I find that's almost more beneficial than like most people who've written these books have never done anything. So it's like they have a bunch of great ideas, but they haven't been field tested. When you listen to like biography of a guy like Richard Branson, or even like reading the biography of somebody like Anthony Kiedis, I learn more about how to live life and how to achieve what I want from hearing how those guys actually solved problems and came up with ideas than from hearing somebody spout off ideas about how you're supposed to do it, but they've never actually done it. The last book I'm going to recommend, and I don't know who the author is, but if you just Google the Lean Startup Method, there's a whole family of books and websites and like papers under that like genre. It was like one guy, Ostermeyer or something, that like wrote the original Lean Startup, but now there's been like a bunch of like offshoots that have come off of it. But if you have any entrepreneurial tendencies, this book is going to give you a blueprint about how to go about testing and building that business without putting a lot of money into it. Because anyways, I'm not going to do a deep dive into this book, but it lays out a very clear plan where how you can do customer discovery to find out if the idea you have will actually have a product market fit before you sink a ton of money. Like most people think, and this is what stops most people. They're like, oh, I need a bunch of money. I have to create a prototype product, and I have to do all this stuff before I can find out if my idea works, and I'm never going to be able to do that. That's bullshit. You don't need to be able to do that. I started Mindful Reviews for like $500. If you add everything up, like the website costs and like all that stuff, and it could have been a flop, and I would have been out $500 and some weekend time. So who cares? I started BeThink, my consulting agency, same thing. We spent a little bit more money on like legal and incorporation just because we were partnering up and it was important to like keep things above board, but like spent almost nothing to start that business. And there's a proper way to find out if your idea has merit before you invest a bunch of money. And the Lean Startup Method is the best method I've heard of to actually go about doing that. Ethan says, what would be your go-to budget tent for a late September Colorado elk hunt? I would look at a floorless shelter because you're not going to have a bug problem on late September, and Colorado is pretty dry. And that being said, there's not even really an issue with a floorless tent in a floorless shelter in a rainy environment. I've slept in my mega tarp and other floorless shelters heaps in the rain and never had an issue. You just got to be more cognizant of where you actually set it up. Bugs are the primary issue with floorless shelters. And by the time you take a floorless shelter and put a bug net in it, you're kind of right back up at what a normal tent would cost you anyways. So option number one would be some type of floorless shelter. Seek Outside has a bunch of like really reasonable options. I would also say like, don't be afraid of like a budget mountaineering brand. You know, like, I don't know if you're hunting in Colorado, so you're probably in the States, but like going to REI and looking at tents that are in like the $100 to $150 range. It's not going to be the best thing in the world. It's not going to last you for 10 years and it's probably going to be a little bit heavier, but so what? You're probably not going 10 days in the backcountry. If you're probably bivvy hunting for elk, so you're like moving every day, you're probably going to try and shoot and have like a 60-pound backpack. So having an extra pound or two of tent is not going to be that big deal. I don't think there's any problems with that. Yeah, that's what I would recommend. An affordable floorless shelter. I can't think of many off the top of my head. If you want to DM me after this, I'm happy to like hop online and look up a couple. Or if you find a couple and you want to send me links and you want some feedback, just let me know. I'm more than happy to help. But that would be my recommendation. Budget floorless shelter or like a budget, camping mountaineering tent from like your local REI. Go look for something on sale. Keep an eye on sale items. Somebody wants to know how the Stone Glacier Sky Solus did. Well, you will all find out in about 2 weeks, maybe 3. Going to Arizona for a few days next month, and that might affect the schedule somehow. But I'm going to do a head-to-head comparison of the Stone Glacier Solus and another tent, which you can probably guess, but maybe you can't. It did very well, but I will do a very thorough explanation of what I mean by that. And then some more, what hunts are you doing? And then someone specifically says, plans on hunting in the States and which states are you currently building points? And that's the last question. So the only thing I put in for this year was for aoudad and mule deer in New Mexico next year. So that would be for early 2024. I had a lot of really great hunts planned with really good people this year in BC. So didn't want to complicate things and just bought points all the way across the board. Because I'm getting to a pretty competitive point with my points, next year I will really start applying and trying to use up some of those points. And I'm going to plan a couple big hunts down in the States for sure. So places I'm currently building points are Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, and Nevada. I think that's it. There might be one more, but if there is, I can't think of it off the top of my head. All right, folks, there you have it. Another episode of the Mindful Hunter podcast. I appreciate you hanging out. I appreciate all the really great questions. If you want to come over and hang out with us at Mindful Reviews, please do. If you could take a brief moment to engage with the platform in any way, shape, or form, like, comment, share, subscribe, post it to your stories, it would be greatly appreciated. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.